Good morning. It's a Saturday morning and I just turned the lights off. Light is really critical when you're doing relief sculptures because some lights, I'll give you a little demonstration. This is natural light, okay? This is natural light. Now, watch what happens when I change the light source. Here is one set of spots. Here's another spot. And as you can see, different light affects the contour, what you can see. It doesn't change the contours, it just changes what is apparent to the eye. So yesterday and today I was very frustrated because I had a baby built up and I tore it down because it just wasn't quite right. His body was sort of at an angle. And it's all I could see was this wrong angle. And now he's perfectly vertical like Christ who's holding him. And Barry also noticed that the baby seemed to be floating. He wasn't really touching Christ's arm. And that was a problem. So anyway.
So are you still mad at me?
No, I got over being mad at you for calling that to my attention. And I hope that the new baby is an improvement. I've been working on him for a couple of hours and thought about him all night, of course. Couldn't wait to get here and get my hands in the clay again. Good morning. It's a Wednesday morning, and I guess you could say that phase 1 of this work is substantially complete. 2 weeks of frenetic activity, building the composition, building the bulk of the figures is done. And I took 3 much needed days of rest.
And now we're sleeping at night,
Yes.
eating during the day, and
Yes.
going to exercise again.
Yeah, had a good swim this morning at the Y and feel renewed and ready to tackle it again. So,
We have a new baby since the last video, I think.
oh, this is true. Not we directly, but oh, this baby. I thought you were talking about Adair Shatry's baby.
No, the clay baby.
A clay baby, yes. Okay, first of all, we'll talk about this particular baby, this inanimate baby. Last week, toward the end of my 2 weeks of frenetic work, my husband kept saying that the baby just didn't look right. You'll notice that the posture is completely changed. It was a full frontal Buddha-like pose that I had, and it just was not very natural, and it sort of stood out in a way that wasn't good. So I have turned him sideways into a more common pose and a more realistic pose, I think. I'm still struggling with his face. I'm not happy completely with the baby's face, but we'll get there. And I do think it is an improvement in terms of the overall composition, turning the baby to the side. So I haven't started working on the textures yet, but that's next. I have a lot of work to do on the egret. I want to do beautiful wings on the egret. His form is there, but the look of wings is not yet. Part of the challenge at this stage of the work is to not overdo it, because I love the way it looks, the roughness of it, particularly the flat surfaces, the background. I don't think I'm going to do a great deal of smoothing out of those, other than these runs. There are a lot of runs, and I want the lines to basically move horizontally. These lines will go. The branches need to be widened a bit. The trees to look more like trees. What else?
So show us your studio.
Okay, my studio. This is where I work. There are my bookshelves with all my art books gathered over the years. Speaking of books, on my chair here is a book, The Gates of Paradise, Lorenzo Ghiberti's Renaissance masterpiece. 2:30 in the morning I came across this book and meditated on its incredible beauty and noticed how Ghiberti worked in low and high relief and combined the two beautifully. At any rate, I stared at the book, looked at the book, and I came across this picture of a work by Ghiberti called Madonna and Child, done in 1450. It's at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I love the posture of the baby, and it's very similar to what I've done with the infant Christ. I've turned him to the side. This baby, of course, is nestled a little more deeply into the figure of the Madonna, which is as it should be. I still want mine to look more iconic and to be looking directly out at the viewer. So, but at any rate, I find great inspiration from the old masters, always have, hopefully always will. Not that we're copying the old masters, but we're just gaining insight from them. Insight and inspiration. So I brought that to the studio today to refer to it. And
You can tell how cold it is outside by how many inches the cat is away from the heater. So it must be pretty cold this morning.
so this is a clay work in progress that I started right before I started the big panels, a mother and child.
This is the bronze hoop that I did in a previous video, and now she's making a sculpture to fit the inside.
As I was creating this piece, I was brought back to the birth of my first child, Genevieve, and how the first day of her life, we just sat in the hospital and I stared at her. Just like that. I propped her up on my legs, on my thighs, and just stared at her all day. We had what then was called rooming in, which was an innovation at the time, because it used to be that a mother would have her baby and the nurses would whisk the baby off and only bring the baby in for feedings periodically through the day. But in 1981, thoughts were a little different, and they wanted the mother and child to bond more completely. So I was fortunate enough to be able to have Jenny almost all the time with me, Genevieve.
And this piece is a little bit on the back burner now that the reliefs are underway.
But it's great. Oil-based clay, it'll sit, it'll wait.
Very patient.
Extremely patient. So that larger piece came out of a couple of smaller pieces that I had done. This is a bronze Barry cast several years ago, 2 years ago. And I call this one Embracing the Word. It's a young girl reading. And I have one of a mother and child, more like the clay, but it's not, I don't have one out here in the studio. In the back there is a piece we did just this year called the Magi Box. Barry made a beautiful little wooden box and cast the figures of the three kings and the Madonna and Child in bronze. And it's out here on display. This is a Holy Family. It was the maquette for a life-size Holy Family that's in Brother Martin High School's chapel in New Orleans. And this is a bronze cast that Barry did at the foundry. This is a piece called Christ Victorious. I did the original, which is 3 feet high, for a church, Prince of Peace Catholic Church in Flowery Branch, Georgia. And it hangs in their reconciliation room. So this is a small tabletop piece that's been very popular here in Baton Rouge among my customers. And as you can see, there are 3 more over there on my somewhat disorganized table. Usually I have this up because I have a beautiful arbor next to my studio that Barry built for me, but it looks kind of sad during the winter because the wisteria vine is dormant. So there's some other pieces that I've done throughout the years.
How about these little ones up here?
Oh, okay. We just hung these, but I've been working on this series for 9 years. I know that because the first one I did was for my granddaughter, Maggie, and I do one every year on her birthday. They're illustrations from children's books. And you can see there, starting from the left, I'll show you what they are. This is Rudyard Kipling's The Elephant's Child. This is Where the Wild Things Are. Most people recognize that story. Maurice Sendak. This is Olivia, the mischievous little pig. And this is Ferdinand, the bull, when he was young, a young bull. And this is the Giving Tree, which I wish the lights were better on these, but at any rate, that's from the Giving Tree, Shel Silverstein. And there's two more over to the left of the doors. One is Curious George,
He's crooked.
perennial
That's okay.
favorite. And the other is Caps for Sale, my favorite children's book of all time, because children absolutely delight when you read it to them. So, those are some of my other works. Moving around, there's my shelf of smaller works that are popular, especially at this time of year prior to Christmas.
Where was this larger piece?
This piece here was, it's Wedding at Cana, Mary leading Jesus to his first miracle. And it was, the bronze is in a church in West Virginia called St. Agnes Catholic Community. Brand new church.
And this is the only other cast.
This, yes, it is. A hydrostone cast. And then this is a fragment from one of the Stations of the Cross series that I did. And that was Jesus is Condemned to Death. These are photographs that my dear children had mounted and framed for me of my largest work to date, not counting this one.
It's hard to get them because of the glare.
The glare. But anyway, it's an incarnation triptych and a resurrection relief at the Franciscan Renewal Center's new church in Phoenix, Arizona. Then that piece there is St. Luke. A woman commissioned me to do this for her son who was graduating from medical school. St. Luke being the patron saint of physicians and artists, by the way. This is a large piece of St. Francis and the Wolf of Gubbio, which I completed last year, maybe? Recently, fairly recently. And there is Julian Poydras, portrait bust I did many years ago.
He's in a local museum.
Yes, he's considered the father of public education in Louisiana.
Where did this Jesus head come from?
Well, that was one of many tries that was rejected by me for the Teaching Christ sculpture, a life-size sculpture of Christ in the Brother Martin High School chapel.
And rubber molds.
Rubber molds through the years, Stations of the Cross, Mysteries of the Rosary, Gospel of John.
And we have these under our bed in our bedroom, in closets in the house, in the attic above our heads, in the mold shed that I built specifically for molds that's behind our studio, and in the attic of my foundry above the sea cans, and across the street in half of the carport, which we save for our personal use of a rental house. So we have lots of rubber molds. It's kind of hard to throw them away. You never know when to throw them away or not.
Yes, so there's a look at my studio, my little place of work, before I get started on phase 2.
Very good.